Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Coca-Cola34. I'm here today to give you another Prehistoric Subjects File episode, and today we're going to do it on Psittacosaurus. Now, Psittacosaurus was a ancient ceratopsian that lived around 123.2 to 100 million years ago in Asia. Now, specific locations are such areas as Mongolia, Siberia, China, and there are possible remains from Thailand. Now, currently, Psittacosaurus is the most biodiverse genus of non-avian dinosaur on the planet, with at least 11 species currently valid, though there is a possible 12th on the way. Now, this is still for debate because as of 2013, there were 3 species actually synonymized together, and 2 species were actually debunked because they were actually found to be growth stages of one of the species. Now, Psittacosaurus was first discovered in 1923 by Henry Osborn, and he found 2 specimens. Now, he named the first specimen Psittacosaurus mongoliensis, but then he named the second specimen Protoiguanodon mongolens, and he actually later found out that these 2 specimens were actually the same species, so he actually synonymized the second genus into Psittacosaurus. So now Psittacosaurus is pretty much the existing genus of those 2 genuses, or genera, as you like to say. Now, in 2016, a Chinese specimen of a yet unnamed Psittacosaurus species that's been designated as Psittacosaurus sp, meaning Psittacosaurus species, was actually found to have dark tones of skin or melanosomes in its skin when they examined the actual fossil. Now, what they also found is that the keratin that you find in the hairs of humans and horns of rhinos is actually found on a sheath that is around the jugal, which is around the cheekbone. And the jugal also has some possessions of high conifered bristles that arrange on the clusters of the tail, and they can be around groups of 3 to 6 individual bristles, which could add as a defense. And the skin as a whole was a defense because what it did is that this strange mix of lighter on the bottom and darker on the top basically allowed for something called counter shading, which would in fact confuse the predators that it was actually being hunted by. And what the predator would actually see like a flat shape, and he would actually think that this animal was not there, but in fact it was there. It was just camouflage. So that's quite an interesting protection or defense against predators, using counter shading to actually appear flat and appear not there, which is quite interesting. Now, the first species of Psittacosaurus I'm going to talk about is Psittacosaurus mongoliensis. Now, mongoliensis is the type species and is defined by the flat top skull with flanges on the jaw, has a femur length of around 21 centimeters, and the anterorbital fossa is actually outside of the surface of the maxilla, which is something you don't really see on some dinosaurs, but apparently with this genus you do. The next species is known as Psittacosaurus Sinensis, and Psittacosaurus Sinensis actually had smaller skulls and less teeth than Psittacosaurus mongoliensis, and the premaxilla has a contact with the jugal bone outside the skull. Now, the jugals have horns, and the mandible lacks a fenestra. The jaw also has an underbite, and the skull on average measures around 11.5 centimeters in length. The next species, and the largest of the genus of Psittacosaurus, is Psittacosaurus Baracus. Now, Psittacosaurus Baracus possibly had a skull length of around 20.7 centimeters, a femur length of 22.3 centimeters, and possibly possessed a neck frill. And what do I mean as a neck frill? I mean it may have had a slight jutting of the possibly the skull area or the neck area, where it actually looked like a frill. Now, it had horns around the eyes, which is unusual for most Psittacosaurus species, and it's generally told apart from other species due to its an astounding number of 32 anatomical features that it has distinct from other species. It's actually very unique to the other species, and in my opinion, I think it should be classified as a different genus entirely. The next species of Psittacosaurus is Psittacosaurus Sinensis, which is characterized by having jugal horns, but the jugal horns, unlike other species, are actually flat at the ends. There's also a long bony process that actually exists behind the hip, and the femur on this particular animal is estimated at about 16 centimeters, from the type specimen. The next species is called Psittacosaurus Sinensis, which is defined by a short snout compared to other Psittacosaurus species, it having a neck frill like Psittacosaurus Baracus, and also the orbit is sort of a triangular shape, which is strange. There are also flanges on the lower dentary of the actual animal's jaw. The next species is known as Psittacosaurus Sinensis, which is known for having flanges that are actually very, very similar to that of Psittacosaurus Sinensis, though it differs from other species in other anatomical features. The next species is known as Psittacosaurus Sinensis, which has a narrower skull, a ischium that is longer than its femur, a skull length of around 13.2 centimeters, though the particular type specimen they actually found was actually not fully grown, so therefore it could actually grow a lot larger. Now, additionally, the skull would actually be longer, as well as the tail being longer, proportionally, than that of Psittacosaurus mongoliensis. The next species is known as Psittacosaurus Sinensis, which is known for having jugal bones like most other species, but has a skull length of around 9.5 centimeters, so it actually has a quite small skull in proportion to the other species of Psittacosaurus. The next species is known as Psittacosaurus Ensis, which has a skull length of around 19 to 20.5 centimeters. It's actually very similar in size to that of Psittacosaurus mongoliensis and Psittacosaurus Baracus. However, there are other features that differ it from those species, such as the fossa in the front of the eye is characteristic of that particular species, and also the jugal actually flares outwards, making the skull actually wider than it is long. And additionally, this is actually known as the first and earliest Psittacosaurus species, so it's actually quite primitive in its traits, which is unlike anything I've seen with other species. The final species I'm going to talk about today is Psittacosaurus gobiensis. Now, gobiensis is actually around 1 meter in length, so it's actually quite small. It has a pyramidal horn on the postorbital, and also has a depression on the postorbital jugal contact area, and also it has thicker enamel on its teeth, which distinguishes it from other species. And I just love the name of this particular species, because gobby, I mean, it's a British term. Basically, you're mouthing off to people, you're basically just talking too much. It's just, yeah, you're being a bit meh, you're shouting a bit too much. That's why I love this species. It's just got a great name, Psittacosaurus gobiensis. Now, it turns out that Psittacosaurus, actually as a genus, has a higher EQ than later ceratopsians, such as Triceratops. Now, the skulls of Psittacosaurus have actually been analysed, and the olfactory bulb actually shows that it had a great sense of smell. Now, other anatomical features show that it was actually very agile for such a small dinosaur and for a certain build, and also it was actually quite active throughout the day. Now, like most dinosaurs, Psittacosaurus actually had a rapid growth. However, some calculations actually determined that it actually had a slower growth than modern day birds, which shows that it would have had somewhere of a metabolism in between that of a bird and a crocodile probably. Now, there's a particular famous specimen collection of Psittacosaurus juveniles that have actually been found in volcanic mudflow, and they were actually killed when a volcano exploded and actually buried them very rapidly and very quickly. Now, it's actually been found out that Psittacosaurus as a genus was actually quite caring of its young, and in fact, Psittacosaurus of a particular age, as the age has been implied of 6 years old, would actually act as caretakers for smaller juveniles while the adults maybe went off and fed, or maybe while the herd was feeding and they needed sentries to look after the babies. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this particular episode. Now, I didn't get a lot of the information that I wanted to, just because there was so much information I could talk about Psittacosaurus. But I hope you enjoyed me talking about the specific species and what differs them, even though some of the species there isn't really much about them. So, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I shall see you later. Bye bye.